What is up, everybody? Why does this feel so low today? Do I have just good posture or something? Okay. I'm just not sitting as far forward as I normally do. Alright, so today, you already know what we're doing. Going to chapter 3. Let's just get right into it. Reading Halo, The Fall of Reach. Chapter 3, 2300 hours. September 23rd, 2517. Military calendar. Epsilon Eridani System. Reach Military Complex. Planet Reach. Dr. Halsey stood on a platform in the center of the amphitheater. Concentric rings of slate-gray risers surrounded her, empty for now. Overhead spotlights focused and reflected off her white lab coat, but she was still cold. But she still was cold. She should feel safe here. Reach was one of the UNSC's largest industrial bases, ringed with high-orbit gun batteries, space docks, and a fleet of heavily armed capital ships. On the planet's surface were Marine and Navy Special Warfare training grounds, OCS schools, and between her underground facilities and the surface were 300 meters of hardened steel and concrete. The room where she stood now could withstand a direct hit from an 80 megaton nuke. So why did she feel so vulnerable? Dr. Halsey knew what she had to do, her duty. It was for the greater good. All humanity would be served, even if a tiny handful of them had to suffer for it. Still, when she turned inward and faced her complicity in this, she was revolted by what she saw. She wished she still had Lieutenant Keyes. He had proven himself a capable assistant during the last month, but he had begun to understand the nature of the project. At least seen the edges of the truth. Dr. Halsey had reassigned him to the Magellan, with a commission to full lieutenant for his troubles. "Are you ready, Doctor?" a disembodied voice asked. "Almost, Deja," Dr. Halsey sighed. "Please summon Chief Petty Officer Mendez. I'd like both of you present when I address them." Deja's hologram flicked on next to Dr. Halsey. The AI had been specifically created for Dr. Halsey's Spartan project. She took the appearance of a Greek goddess, barefoot, wrapped in a toga, motes of light dancing about her luminous white hair. She held a clay tablet in her left hand. Binary cuneiform markings scrolled across the tablet. Dr. Halsey couldn't help but marvel at the AI's chosen form. Each AI self-assigned a holographic appearance, and each was unique. One of the doors at the top of the amphitheater opened and Chief Petty Officer Mendez strode down the stairs. He wore a black dress uniform, his chest awash with silver and gold stars and a rainbow of campaign ribbons. His close-shorn hair had a touch of gray at the temples. He was neither tall nor muscular. He looked so ordinary for a man who had seen so much combat, except for his stride. The man moved with a slow grace as if he were walking in half-gravity. He paused before Dr. Halsey, awaiting further instructions. "Up here, please," she told him, gesturing to the stairs on her right. Mendez mounted the steps of the platform and then stood at ease next to her. "You have read my psychological evaluations," Deja asked Dr. Halsey. "Yes, they were quite thorough," she said. "Thank you. And I'm foregoing your recommendations, Deja. I'm going to tell them the truth." Mendez gave a nearly inaudible grunt of approval, one of the most verbose acknowledgments Dr. Halsey had heard from him. As a hand-to-hand combat and physical training DI, Mendez was the best in the Navy. As a conversationalist, however, he left a great deal to be desired. "The truth has risks," Deja cautioned. "So do lies," Dr. Halsey replied. "Any story fabricated to motivate the children, claiming their parents were taken and killed by pirates or by a plague that devastated their planet, if they learned the truth later, they would turn against us. It is a legitimate concern," conceded Deja, and then she consulted her tablet. "May I suggest selective neural paralysis. It produces a targeted amnesia, a memory loss that may leak into other parts of the brain. No, Dr. Halsey said. This will be dangerous enough for them even with intact minds. Dr. Halsey clicked on her microphone. Bring them in now. Aye, aye, a voice replied from the speakers in the ceiling. They'll adapt, Dr. Halsey told Deja. Or they won't, and they will be untrainable and unsuitable for the project. Either way, I just want to get this over with. 4 sets of double doors at the top tier of the amphitheater swung open. 75 children marched in, each accompanied by a handler, a Navy drill instructor in camouflage pattern fatigues. The children had circles of fatigue around their eyes. They had all been collected, rushed here through slipstream space, and only recently brought out of cryosleep. The shock of their ordeal must be hitting them hard, Halsey realized. She stifled a pang of regret. When they had been seated in the risers, Dr. Halsey cleared her throat and spoke. As per Naval Code 45812, you are hereby conscripted into the UNSC Special Project codenamed Spartan 2. She paused. The words stuck in her windpipe. How could they possibly understand this? She barely understood the justifications and ethics behind this program. They looked so confused. A few tried to stand and leave, but their handlers placed firm hands on their shoulders and pushed them back down. 6 years old. This was too much for them to digest, but she had to make them understand, explain it in simple terms that they could grasp. Dr. Halsey took a tentative step forward. You've been called upon to serve, she explained. You will be trained, and you will become the best we can make of you. You will be the protectors of Earth and all her colonies. A handful of children sat up straighter, no longer entirely frightened, but now interested. Dr. Halsey spotted John, subject number 117, the first boy she had confirmed as a viable candidate. He wrinkled his forehead, confused, but he listened with rapt attention. This will be hard to understand, but you cannot return to your parents. The children stirred. Their handlers kept a firm grip on their shoulders. This place will become your home, Dr. Halsey said in a soothing voice, as soothing a voice as she could muster. Your fellow trainees will be your family now. The training will be difficult. There will be a great deal of hardship on the road ahead, but I know you will all make it. Patriotic words, but they rang hollow in her ears. She had wanted to tell them the truth, but how could she? Not all of them would make it. Acceptable losses, the Office of Naval Intelligence representative had assured her. None of it was acceptable. Rest now, Dr. Halsey said to them. We begin tomorrow. She turned to Mendez. Have the children, the trainees, escorted to their barracks. Feed them and put them to bed. Yes, ma'am, Mendez said. Fall out, he shouted. The children rose at the urging of their handlers. John 117 stood, but he kept his gaze on Dr. Halsey and remained stoic. Many of the subjects seemed stunned. A few had trembling lips, but none of them cried. They were indeed the right children for the project. Dr. Halsey only hoped that she had half their courage when the time came. Keep them busy tomorrow, she told Mendez and Deja. Keep them from thinking about what we've just done to them. Section 2. Boot. How long is chapter 4? Because that was really short. Chapter 4 is really long. Okay, well, let's just be a really long video then. I'm taking a break though. I need water. Comically large water bottle. It's a pretty good book. It's hot as shit in this room though. And there's hair in my eye. Like 1 or 2 stray hairs. Oh man, okay. Here we go. Chapter 4. 0530 hours. September 24th, 2517. Military calendar. Epsilon Eridani system. Reach military complex. Planet Reach. Wake up, trainee. John rolled over in his cot and went back to sleep. He was dimly aware that this wasn't his room and that there were other people here. A shock jolted him from his bare feet to the base of his spine. He yelled in surprise and fell off the cot. He shook off the disorientation from being nearly asleep and got up. I said up, Boot. You know which way up is? A man in camouflage uniform stood over John. His hair was shorn and gray at his temples. His dark eyes didn't look human. Too big and black, and they didn't blink. He held a silver baton in one hand. He flicked it toward John, and it sparked. John backed away. He wasn't afraid of anything. Only little kids were afraid. But his body instinctively moved as far away from the instrument as possible. Dozens of other men roused the rest of the children. 74 boys and girls screamed and jumped out of their cots. I am Chief Petty Officer Mendez, the uniformed man next to John shouted. The rest of these men are your instructors. You will do exactly as we tell you at all times. Mendez pointed at the far end of the center block barracks. Showers are aft. You will all wash and then return here to dress. He opened a trunk at the foot of John's cot and pulled out a matching set of gray sweats. John leaned closer and saw his name stenciled on the chest. John 117. Jesus. No slacking. On the double. Mendez tapped John between his shoulder blades with the baton. Lightning surged across John's chest. He sprawled on the cot and gasped for breath. I mean it. Go, go, go. John moved. He couldn't inhale, but he ran anyway, clutching his chest. He managed a ragged breath by the time he got to the showers. The other kids looked scared and disoriented. They all stripped off their nightshirts and stepped onto the conveyor, washed themselves in lukewarm soapy water, then rinsed in an icy cold spray. He ran back to his bunk, got into underwear, thick socks, pulled on the sweats, and a pair of combat boots that fit his feet perfectly. Outside, trainees, Mendez announced. Triple time. March. John and the others stampeded out of the barracks onto a strip of grass. Sun hadn't even risen yet, and the edge of the sky was indigo. The grass was wet with dew. There were dozens of rows of barracks. But no one else was up and outside. A pair of jets roared overhead and arced up into the sky. Far away, John heard a metallic crackle. Chief Petty Officer Mendez barked, You'll make 5 equal-length rows, 15 trainees each. He waited for a few seconds after they milled about. Straighten those rows. You know how to count to 15, trainee? Take 3 steps back. John stepped into the second row. As he breathed the cold air, he began to wake up. He started to remember they had taken him in the middle of the night. They injected him with something, and he slept for a long time. Then the woman who had given him the coin told him he couldn't go back, that he wouldn't see his mother or father. Jumping jacks, Mendez shouted. Count off to 100. Ready? Go. The officer started the exercise, and John followed his lead. One boy refused for a split second. An instructor was on him instantly. The baton whipped into the boy's stomach. The kid doubled over. Get with the program, Boot, the trainer snarled. The boy uncurled and started jumping. John had never done so many jumping jacks in his life. His arms and stomach and legs burned. Sweat trickled down his back. 98, 99, 100. Mendez paused. Drew in a deep breath. Sit-ups. He dropped onto the grass. Count off to 100. No slacking. John threw himself on the ground. The first crewman who quits, Mendez said, gets to run around the compound twice, and then comes back here and does 200 sit-ups. Ready? Count off. 1, 2, 3. Deep squats followed, then knee bends. John threw up, but that didn't buy him any respite. A trainer descended on him after a few seconds. John rolled back over and continued. Leg lifts, Mendez continued, like he was a machine, as if they were all machines. John couldn't go on, but he knew he'd get the baton again if he stopped. He tried. He had to move. His legs trembled and only sluggishly responded. "Rest," Mendez finally called. "Trainers, get the water." Trainers wheeled out carts laden with water bottles. John grabbed one and gulped down the liquid. It was warm and slightly salty. He didn't care. It was the best water he'd ever had. He flopped on his back in the grass and panted. The sun was up now. It was warm. He rolled to his knees and let the sweat drip off him like a heavy rain. He slowly got up and glanced at the other children. They crouched on the ground, holding their sides, and no one talked. Their clothes were soaked through with perspiration. John didn't recognize anyone from his school here, so he was alone with strangers. He wondered where his mother was, and what... "A good start, trainees," Mendez told him. Now we run. On your feet." Trainers brandished their batons and herded the trainees along. They jogged down a gravel path through the compound, past more cinder block barracks. Their run seemed to go on forever. They ran alongside a river, over a bridge, then by the edge of a runway where jets took off straight into the air. Once past the runway, Mendez led them on a zigzagging path of stone. John wanted to think about what had happened, now how he got here, and what was going to happen next. But he couldn't think straight. All he could feel was the blood pounding through him, the ache in his muscles, and hunger. They ran into a courtyard of smooth flagstones. A pole in the center flew the colors of the UNSC, a blue field with stars and earth in the corner. The far end of the yard was a building with a scalloped dome and white columns, and dozens of wide steps leading to the entrance. The words Naval Officers Academy were chiseled into the arch over the entrance. A woman stood on the top step and beckoned to them. She wore a white sheet wrapped around her body. She looked old to John, yet young at the same time. Then he saw the motes of light orbiting around her head and knew she was an AI. He had seen them on vids. She wasn't solid, but she was still real. Excellent work. Jesus. "Excellent work, Chief Petty Officer Mendez," she said in a resonant, silk-smooth voice. She turned to the children. "Welcome. My name is Deja, and I will be your teacher. Please, come in. Class is about to start." John groaned out loud. Several of the others grumbled too. She turned and started to walk inside. "Of course," she said, "if you prefer to skip your lessons, you may continue the morning calisthenics." John double-timed it up the steps. It was cool inside. A tray with crackers and a carton of milk had been laid out for each of them. John nibbled on the dry, stale food, then gulped down his milk. John was so tired he wanted to lay with his head down on the desk and take a nap, until Deja started to tell them about a battle, and how 300 soldiers fought against thousands of Persian infantry. A holographic countryside appeared in the classroom. The children walked around the miniature mountains and hills, and let the edge of the illusionary sea lap at their boots. Toy-sized soldiers marched toward what Deja explained was Thermopylae, a narrow strip of land between steep mountains and the sea. Thousands of soldiers marched toward the 300 who guarded the pass. The soldiers fought. Spears and shields splintered. Swords flashed and spilled blood. John couldn't take his eyes off the spectacle. Deja explained that the 300 were Spartans, and they were the best soldiers who had ever lived. They had been trained to fight since they were children. No one could beat them. John watched, fascinated, as the holographic Spartans slaughtered the Persian spearmen. He had eaten his crackers, but he was still hungry, so he took the girls next to him when she wasn't looking, and munched them down as the battle raged on. His stomach still growled and grumbled. When was lunch? Or was it dinner time already? The Persians broke and ran, and the Spartans stood victorious on the field. The children cheered. They wanted to see it again. "That's all for today," Deja said. "We'll continue tomorrow, and I'll show you some wolves. Now it's time for you to go to the playground." "Playground?" John said. That was perfect. He could finally just sit on a swing, relax, and think for a moment. He ran out of the room, as did the other trainees. Chief Petty Officer Mendez and the trainers waited for them outside the classroom. Time for the playground, Mendez said, and waved the children closer. It's a short run. Fall in. Short run turned into 2 miles, and the playground was like nothing John had ever seen. It was a forest of 20-meter tall wooden poles, rope cargo nets, and bridges stretched between the poles. They swayed, crossed, and crisscrossed one another. A maze suspended in the air. There were slide poles and knotted climbing ropes. There were swings and suspended platforms. There were ropes looped through pulleys and tied to baskets that looked sturdy enough to hoist a person. Trainees, Mendez said, form 3 lines. The instructors moved in to herd them, but John and the others made 3 rows without comment or fuss. First person in every row will be team number 1, Mendez said. Second person in each row will be team number 2, and so on. If you do not understand this, speak up now. No one spoke. John looked to his right. A boy with sandy green eyes and darkly tanned skin gave him a wary smile. Stenciled on his sweat top was Samuel 034. In the row behind Samuel was a girl. She was taller than John, and skinny, with a long mane of hair dyed blue. Kelly 087. She didn't look too happy to see him. Today's game, Mendez explained, is called Ring the Bell. He pointed to the tallest pole on the playground. It stood an additional 10 meters above the others, and had a steel slide pole next to it. Hung at the very top of the pole was a brass bell. There are many ways to get to the bell, he told them. I leave it up to each team to find their own way. When every member of your team has rung the bell, you are to get groundside, double time, and run back here across the finish line. Mendez took his baton and scratched a straight line in the sand. John raised his hand. Mendez glared at him for a moment with those black, unblinking eyes. Question, trainee? What do we win? Mendez cocked one eyebrow and appraised John. You win dinner, number 117. Tonight, dinner's roast turkey, gravy, and mashed potatoes. Corn on the cob, brownies, and ice cream. That sounds fucking great. A murmur of approval swept through the children, right? But, Mendez added, for there to be winners, there must be a loser. The last team to finish goes without food. The children fell silent and then looked at each other warily. Make ready, Mendez says. I'm Sam, the boy whispered to John and the girl on their team. She said, I'm Kelly. John just looked at them and said nothing. The girl would slow him down. Too bad. He was hungry, and he wasn't about to let them make him lose. Go, Mendez shouted. John ran through the pack of children and scrambled up a cargo net onto a platform. He raced across the bridge, jumped onto the next platform, just in time. The bridge flipped and sent 5 others into the water below. He paused at the rope tied to the large basket. It ran up through a pulley and then back down. He didn't think he was strong enough to pull himself up in it. Instead, he tackled a knotted climbing rope and scrunched his body up. The rope swung wildly around the center pole. John looked down and almost lost his grip. It looked twice as far down as it had looked from the ground. He saw all the others, some climbing, others floundering in the water, getting up and starting over. No one was as close to the bell as he was. He swallowed his fear and kept climbing up. He thought of the ice cream and chocolate brownies and how he's going to win. John got to the top, grabbed the bell, and rang it 3 times. He then clasped the steel pole and slid all the way to the ground, falling into a pile of cushions. He got up and ran smiling all the way to the chief petty officer. John crossed the finish line and gave a victory cry. I was first, he said, panting. Mendez nodded and made a check on his clipboard. John watched as the others made it up, rang the bell, then raced across the finish line. Kelly and Sam had trouble. They got stuck in a line to get to the bell as everyone bunched up at the end. They finally rang the bell, slid down together, but they crossed the finish line last. They glared at John. He shrugged. Good work, trainees, Mendez said, and he beamed as he Mendez said, and he beamed at them all. Let's get back to the barracks and chow down. Children covered in mud and leaning on each other cheered. All except Team 3, Mendez said, and looked at Sam, Kelly, and then John. But I won, John protested. I was first. Yes, you were first, Mendez explained, but your team came in last. He then addressed all the children. Remember this, you don't win unless your team wins. One person winning at the expense of the group means that you lose. John ran in a stupor all the way back to the barracks. It wasn't fair. He had won. How can you win and still lose? He watched as the others stuffed themselves with turkey, white meat dripping with gravy. They spooned down mountains of vanilla ice cream and left the mess hall with chocolate encrusting the corners of their mouths. John got a liter of water. He drank it, but it didn't have any taste. It did nothing to fill his hunger. He wanted to cry, but he was too tired. He collapsed in his bunk, thinking of ways to get even with Sam and Kelly for messing him up. But he couldn't think. Every muscle and bone ached. John fell asleep as soon as his head hit the flat pillow. Next day was the same, calisthenics and running all morning, then class until the afternoon. Today Deja taught them about wolves. The classroom became a holographic meadow, and the children watched 7 wolves hunt a moose. The pack worked together, striking wherever the giant beast wasn't facing. It was fascinating and horrifying to watch the wolves track down and then devour an animal many times their size. John avoided Sam and Kelly in the classroom. He stole a few extra crackers when no one was looking, but they didn't dull his hunger. After class, they ran to the playground. Today it was different. There were fewer bridges and more complicated rope and pulley systems. The pole with the bell was now 20 meters taller than any of the others. Same teams as yesterday, Mendez announced. Sam and Kelly walked up to John. Sam shoved him. John's temper flared. He wanted to hit Sam in the face, but he was too tired. He'd need all his strength to get to the bell. You better help us, Sam hissed, or I'll push you off one of those platforms. And I'll jump on top of you, Kelly added. Okay, John whispered. Just try not to slow me down. John examined the course. It was like doing a maze on paper, only this one twisted and turned in and out of the page. Many bridges and rope ladders led to dead ends. He squinted, then found one possible route. He nudged Sam and Kelly, then pointed. Look, he said. That basket and rope on the far side. It goes straight to the top. It's a long pole, though. He flexed his biceps, uncertain if he could make it in his weakened state. We can do it, Sam said. John glanced at the other teams. They were searching the course as well. We'll have to make a quick run for it, he said. Make sure no one else gets there first. I'm fast, Kelly said. Real fast. Trainees, get ready, Mendez shouted. Okay, John said. You sprint ahead and hold it for us. Go! Kelly shot forward. John had never seen anyone move like her. She ran like the wolves he had seen today. Her feet seemed barely to touch the ground. She got to the basket. John and Sam were only halfway there. One boy beat them to the basket. Get out, he ordered Kelly. I'm going up. Sam and John ran up and pushed him back. Wait your turn, Sam said. John and Sam joined Kelly in the basket. Together they pulled on the rope and raised themselves up. There was a lot of rope. For every 3 meters they pulled, they only rose 1 meter. A breeze made the basket sway and bounce into the pole. Faster, John urged. They pulled as one person, 6 hands working in unison, and accelerated into the sky. They didn't get there first. They were third. Each of them got to ring the bell, though. Kelly, Sam, and John. They slid down the pole. Kelly and Sam waited for John to land, and then together they ran across the finish line. Chief Petty Officer Mendez watched them. He didn't say anything, but John thought he saw a smile flicker across his face. Sam clapped John and Kelly on their backs. That was good work, Sam said. He looked thoughtful for a moment, and then said, We can be friends. I mean, if you want. It'd be no big deal. Kelly shrugged and replied, Sure. Okay, John said. Friends. Oh, that was a long ass. Chapter 3 was like 3 pages, and chapter 4 was like 4 times that. Oh man, that was good though. That was good. It is too fucking hot in here though. Yeah, that was good. This is always strange to do. Please like, subscribe, comment. You know what to do. Yeah, come back for the next one if you are enjoying this series. And at some point, probably after I finish this book, I will be doing other books. They're Halo books. I have this strange book that I bought from this small writer. I don't, yeah, author. There you go. That's the word. Jesus Christ. All right, I'll see you in the next one. And I do have a crazy Halo video. Crazy. Bigger Halo video I'm working on. So stay tuned for that as well. Anyway, see ya. Peace.